Hi guys, I wanted to jump on and record this video quickly for you because it stems from a question that we got asked by a patient earlier in the week. And that question was, what's the most effective and efficient way to get rid of my hip bursitis for good? And I thought that's a fantastic question. And I wanted to provide that answer not only for the patient, but also for those of you who this may also benefit. So if you missed that previous email, you could comment below and I can post that info for you. But one of the things we talked about in the email was one really easy exercise that you can do at home. And you know what? It's not even really an exercise. It's more like a functional movement that you can do at home with some very easy props that you've got probably lying around the house. And I wanted to show you how to do that today. So the exercise we're going to go through is called a hip hinge. And the reason this is important, and I would say the number one most important thing to learn when you're trying to eliminate your hip bursitis for good, is because the hip is a ball and socket joint. And what is happening in hip bursitis is that instead of the ball and socket joint staying well aligned and functioning like a ball and socket joint should, the load that's going through your hip is causing the ball and socket to not sit directly in the middle of the socket, and therefore you're putting load onto the hip bursa instead of taking the load through the ball and socket joint where you should. So to be able to correct this, one of the most important things that you need to be able to learn is to hip hinge correctly. That sounds confusing, not confusing at all. All it is learning to get the ball to stay in the socket as you move your hip. So if you want to follow along with me, all you're going to need, and you've probably got this lying around your house already, is a broom. You could also use the stick without the actual head of the broom. I've also taught this to people using a long foam roller, or even some of you have got really long rolling pins. As long as the long part of the stem of the broom is able to reach from your sternum to your pubic bone, then it doesn't really matter, as long as it's a long straight stick. So I'm going to roll my shirt up here so you can see exactly what I'm doing. The first thing that you want to make sure you do is get the head of the broom or the bottom of the stick in line with your pubic bone. So if you need to check where your pubic bone is, it's the bone right at the base of your pelvis, right above your pubic symphysis. So you're going to put the head of the broom or the foam roller or the stick, one end of it on your pubic bone, and the other end of the stick you're going to press up against your sternum, which is your breastbone, that hard bone in the middle of your chest. So one end of the stick is at your pubic bone, one end of the stick is at your sternum. Don't whack yourself in the face when you do it. You probably want to look a little bit to the side. And then essentially you're going to keep the sternum and the pubic bone connected to the broom and start to sit backwards as if you were sitting in a chair. The reason I like doing this with the whole head of the broom in place is that pressure against your pubic bone forces the ball and socket joint of your hip to travel back into the hip socket, which is what we want to practice when we're hip hinging. The other thing that happens, because your sternum is connected to the front of the broom, it stops your spine from extending or flexing when you go into this hip hinge position. And that's a video for another time, but essentially if that happens, your hips may not be going back into the socket as they need to. So that's it. You can do multiple repetitions, you can come down into the hip hinge and hold, and there's a whole variety of extra fun things that you can add with your hips down here, which I will record a video in the future for you. Okay, I hope that was helpful. So all you really need to do if you're trying to get rid of your hip bursitis for good is to learn how to hip hinge, and the easiest way to learn how to hip hinge is to grab yourself a broom or the like, and follow along with that nice hip hinge activity, keeping connection at the sternum and connection at the pubic bone. I hope that was helpful, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.